Welcome back to Meet Bridget, a show that sheds light on the often untold teenage and young adult stories of successful women from all types of backgrounds and in all sorts of careers and paths. This show is an extension of our confidence coaching service for young women. I'm Asha Gabriel, and I co-host this show alongside my best friend and Meet Bridget COO, Kasia Rosenberg. This is season 4 of Meet Bridget, and today we are so excited to have you meet Kasia Michael. Kasia Michaels is a renowned fashion and personal stylist, specializing in helping successful men and women hone their style and show up powerfully and authentically. Her prestigious client list includes C-suite executives, Oscar nominees, and TV personalities. Kasia has been featured as an expert stylist in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Riviera, Daily Mail, and Orange Coast magazines. Passionate about empowering women over 40, Kasia is dedicated to helping them redestyle and live life with renewed confidence and a strong sense of self. As a former world champion ballroom dancer, Kasia believes that powerful style brings endless opportunities. I am so excited to have you here, Kasia. The two of us actually met through the gym, which just feels lovely and healthy of us. But Kasia always has this really polished and just lovely energy about her. And I immediately noticed, I'm like, man, this is a woman that really has style. Even when she's going to work out, I show up in whatever I can like roll out of bed and get into just to show up at the gym. But Kasia always just has this personal style about her in every setting. And she's so good at sharing it with people and inspiring them to find it for themselves. So Kasia, thank you for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me there. And what an introduction. I mean, I feel very humbled for all this introduction. And thank you so much. I didn't think that I'm come off like that.
Well, I love doing the introduction because I think for a lot of women, though, they, have to put together bios at different points in their lives and know that they have accolades. To hear someone else in real time, go through those things and be on the listening end is such a great practice, I think, for women to realize and take a moment like, okay, wow, like that's me. So I love leading with that before we get into
So true.
conversation.
So true. Thank you so much. Sometimes we just, do things and we don't realize of all of the accomplishments that we're going through life. And like you said, it is really good sometimes to take a deep breath and think about those and, pat ourselves on the back and, it boosts confidence for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we always love to, as you might know, we love to take it all the way back to the beginning. We want to paint the picture of where you were born, what your childhood was like. So can you take us there, Kasia?
Oh boy, this is really like walking the memory lane right now. What I would like to say is that my majority of my childhood was really surrounding around ballroom dancing. Since I pretty much remember, I was always a dancer, and before I became a ballroom dancer, I went through other forms of dancing, ballet, jazz, any type of dance, even folk dance, believe me or not, which is not my favorite. But my sister was a folk dancer, and so that's kind of where I end up as well. But ballroom was really the form of dance that really stole my heart. And I was 12 when I started competing on more not professional level, of course, but more serious level, if I would say, where I started to travel a lot and really my career took off and was a huge, huge part of my life at that point.
I love it. So you grew up in Poland, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So for our listener, and you mentioned you have a sister. For our listeners, and from what you know of, how kids kind of grow up in the U.S., you are a stepmom, and you're watching American kids growing up today. What would you say are like the main differences of your childhood growing up in Poland, and how school was handled, your family life, etc.?
Oh boy, where do we start? Now, I will try to keep it brief. I think the biggest difference, and mind you, it's been a while since I was this young, and so things may have changed since my school years, and how Polish parents now raise their children might be a little bit different to how I grew up. But one of the major differences, I would say, was the discipline. We definitely were much more disciplined, I would say. Parents kept a little bit more stricter environment for us. I'm not going to say, for the worse. I mean, it really helped create characters and who we have become. But definitely, I would say kids in US have much more freedom and way of deciding maybe how they want things. When I was growing up, we had certain steps to follow. I think that would be the way to say
So
it.
did you have just one sister or any other siblings?
No, I had a sister and two brothers. So I'm the youngest of four. My siblings were also involved in different sport disciplines. And I guess that's maybe something worth mentioning that back then, parents really tried to encourage us to pursue extra activities or extra hobbies. It was never put on us what exactly we need to do. We were introduced to everything. Like I said, before I was a ballroom dancer, I was doing also all sorts of different dance genres, but I was also doing kayakis and I was also doing volleyball. Like I did a lot of different things before I actually, stumbled upon dance. And I said, okay, this is it. This is what I love. And I want to really stay focused on that. So that's something that is a big part of kids growing up in Poland is pursuing different passions.
Tell us a little bit about like in Poland, did you grow up in the city, in the countryside? What was your town like? In school. Can you paint that picture a little bit for us?
Sure. So the town I grew up in would be considered smaller in this landscape of US, right? Here we talking, like I don't know, Orange County is like 3 million kids. My town was only 200,000 kids. My parents were from the countryside, so I definitely had an access to the countryside on the summer days and off school days when I could go visit my grandparents and really be with the nature. But obviously, growing up in a town, in city, I had an access to more urban stuff that were available. And then when I went to college, I went to a capital, which was pretty big and very urban cosmopolitan place. So I would say I grew up having access to all of it, if that makes sense.
Well, what's the age differences with your siblings and were you close with them? What was the dynamic there?
So, as a youngest of four, my oldest sister was 6 years older, and she was the oldest of all of us. And then my brother and the second brother, so three, four, and
Okay.
six. So, yeah, my parents were very busy.
I can only imagine. I feel like I'm barely putting it together with just two little ones in the house. So four is amazing.
But I have to say, being the youngest of four, I kind of got the best of
Yeah.
it because my parents, by the
You're
time that I was, there, they were like,
Yeah,
whatever, as long as you're not bleeding, you're not, in a hospital, we don't have to be worried about you.
totally.
So I basically had a lot of freedom and independence. And I guess that was, good for me because that independence really stuck with me.
Totally. What were your parents like? Were they working? What were their schedules like and how involved were they with you?
Yeah, my parents both worked. However, my mom took time off until I was 6 years old, and then she went back to work. And then she retired earlier to stay at home, but she had a pretty big chunk of her life working. So both parents were working. So I had this vision of like seeing both parents, working. But they were traditional marriage. So there were some roles and they were not like, strict roles or anything. But I would say my parents naturally kind of took on those roles of, being the male of the house and provider, and my mom being the gatherer and, nurturing, etc.
What industries were they in?
They were both actually in well, my father was in the engineering
Uh-huh.
space, so all the technology and too complicated for me to repeat, I would say. Heavy duty, I
Okay.
would say. And then my mom was in the same field, but more from don't remember exactly
Yeah.
what she did, to be honest with you.
Is that how they met though, being in the same industry?
No, they met
Interesting.
as high school
Oh,
sweethearts.
that's so
So
sweet. Also
yeah,
probably gives you, I mean, that sets a really high standard for, children to look at
relationship.
parents that have had that disdained of a marriage from such an early age is sort of like, wow, that doesn't happen often. Did that impact you, like, growing up?
100%. I mean, my parents, they just celebrated a 50th wedding
Wow.
anniversary. So that was, something amazing to see. And, marriage goes through ups and downs, but they've always stuck out together and pays off now. And, I saw my grandparents, being together for 60 years. So having those examples really shaped me in the believing that there is value in long-term relationships and that those relationships will go through ups and downs, but as long as you stick together and find a solution together and forgive and forget, because mistakes will happen, you can come out on the other side
Absolutely.
better.
Such a good takeaway. When you were in school, like grade school, were you really engaged with your academic? If so, were there any subjects that were like easier for you or more difficult? What was it like walking through the school halls when you were young?
That's something quite interesting because from this, time perspective now, I noticed that most of the kids who are involved in sports or something, they're really engaged in the outside of school activities and they pursue these other passions more on a serious level. They found themselves doing really well in school. And that's goes same for me. I was always a plus student, and not because I was the smartest in the class. Quite frankly, that never came easy to
Mm.
me. I had to really study, but I learned to manage my time pretty well because I knew that in order for me to go to my practices, for dance practices, which always started at 7 p.m. and ended at 10 p.m. At night, I needed to have all of my school done before that and be ready for, the tests and everything else. So I had very strict schedule after school to make sure that I'm really good with all of my responsibilities. And as far as best topics, I think, math was never easy to me. I did well, but it was not something that came easy to me. But I was really great with the linguistic part of school. Yeah. All the history and Polish language and literature.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's such a great point that you made about, how some people might think like, oh, if this is a person that's really engaged in extracurriculars or really focused on sports, that's got to be like taking from somewhere else. So maybe they're not as engaged in school. And I had a similar, and honestly, to this day, I still have this experience that when I'm really engaged in like one thing, just one thing, I actually am a little bit slower and less productive. But if I have kind of two areas that I'm balancing, something about like the pace of having to you really stay organized with both makes me perform better in both. And in school, it was really similar. Like I was really active in like a dance studio and outside of school, but kind of you learn different skills about goal setting and time management in each that can really transfer to the other. So I think that's a really good point because it's not always the case that way that, sometimes just trying to do too much too well is difficult for people, but I think that with different personalities, sometimes that's just the key to unlocking, your full potential is to sort of have different outlets for you to flex those organizational muscles and really not get bored with either too. I think that's a big element for me is that yeah, if I'm just with one thing, I get bored. Like I need to use another part of my brain in order to keep the whole thing functioning.
100%. I totally agree. And, there's a saying, want something done, give it to a
Yeah,
busy person, right?
totally. You're like, I have no
And,
time, but okay, how can I help you?
well, right, because you know that you have to get it done. And that's kind of how it was for me at school. And, a lot of teachers were very on board with my dancing because, at that time I became super busy with dance. Became pretty famous with that as well. And a lot of teachers knew that I was going to a competitions every
Oh,
weekend. I would train Monday to Friday and I would compete on Saturday and or Sunday. So there was no time off and it was just basically my life. And a lot of teachers would know that, right? Because oftentimes I would have to skip school on either Friday or Monday because, my competitions would be in Germany or they would be in Holland. They wouldn't be necessarily in Poland. So it took some time to travel there. And so I obviously had to have permission from the school to have this type of personalized, a little bit of a school schedule in that regard. But I also had to be very prepared for all of my responsibilities at school.
Making that
So
work and everything.
100%. So the teachers were, as long as your grades don't fall back, we're okay with that. But so there was some expectations, and it was like, okay, if I want to continue my dance career, I had to make sure that my grades were on top. They were good.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about like the first time you found ballroom dancing and what clicked with you, how it felt to you at the time as a child, really, when you hit your, I mean, I see you smiling right now, which is so fun because you light up when you talk about the things those moments that really transform us. So can you just tell us about that moment, the first time you found ballroom dancing?
Not a problem. And I'm smiling because I remember it like it was yesterday, and definitely it wasn't yesterday. And I'm smiling because it wasn't really the dance that really captivated me, but the dresses. It was all the ballroom dresses, the glitz, the Swarovskis, the feathers.
Uh-huh.
And as a young girl, who likes to dress in her mom's clothes, that was something that I'm like, oh my God, I can have these dresses all the time. If I dance, I can dress like that. This is awesome. I want to do this. So that's basically how it happened. Like I mentioned before, I was doing all sorts of different dance genres. And in the same facility, there was ballroom dance. And I sneaked, into this other room when I saw these beautiful dancers dancing, and it was the dance competition. And I was mesmerized by all the dresses. And I'm like, I want to do that. How do I do this? And I didn't even tell my parents that I'm going to start taking classes because it was a summertime and they had this kind of free workshop, 2 weeks, come in every day for a couple of hours. It was open to the public. And so that's what I started doing. I didn't even tell my parents about this yet because I was worried that they're going to maybe be upset with me that I'm not loving the folk dance like my sister did, etc. Yes. So I started going to those free classes. And at the end of the free classes, they noticed I had a little bit of a potential. So they said, well, we'd like to invite you to join. We called it club, but it's obviously that's going to be misunderstood. So let's say it's studio. So it was like, we want you to join our studio, but we need your parents' permission. And I'm like, oh boy, how do I say this now?
Yeah.
So I did. I took a deep breath and I told my parents that, I've been going to this studio for pre-classes, and they said I had potential and I'd like to join the team. Will that be okay? And my parents said, no problem. Like I said, they would always encourage whatever I wanted to do. And that's how it whole career started.
I love it. I love that you mentioned the clothes because part of the reason I've been so excited for this interview is that I knew you had this background of ballroom dancing. And obviously, you have made this big career pivot in a way to becoming a very successful stylist. And I think with career pivots, especially in pivots that seem like they're completely different industries, there's always something where it's like the seed for the thing you're doing now is always there when you're younger. It just might be showing up a different way, or you might be using some potential into a certain outlet that also can be used into something else. And I think that it's so valuable for women of all ages to hear those stories because sometimes, when a certain career or a certain track kind of just runs its course or doesn't feel right anymore, it can feel really discouraging. Like, how do I start over? Or how do I switch to something else? And then really the truth is that you're not starting over at all. It's the same energy. You're the same person. It's just a matter of taking those skills and those passions and realizing that they can be applied to something that might seem on the surface completely different.
Different. Yeah, totally. And, like you said, I made this career, pivot after 30 years of successful ballroom
Wow.
dance career. So Not gonna lie, a lot of my colleagues in ballroom industry were a little bit surprised when I decided to retire and say, okay, this was great. I loved it. I was passionate about it, but it's time to do something else. Because at the time, I didn't have to worry about clients and everything was already rolling like a very nice, well-oiled machine. My reputation preceded me. So clients were coming to me. Like I said, who would leave such a comfortable situation, right? Where you don't have to be worried about how to get business because business comes to you. And I think that's where I knew it was time for me to exit because for some reason, and I guess all the younger years, me trying to pursue the ballroom career, where I was taking myself outside of my comfort zone all the time, I think that's something that is very deeply ingrained in me. And at the moment when I felt like I'm too comfortable and I no longer feel challenged and I no longer feel like there is something I need to learn, I felt bored and uninspired. And I never lost the love for dancing. I just lost the spark for it. So this is why I decided to pursue another career. And I approached it exactly the same way like I approach ballroom dance, because like you mentioned, that it's not really something completely different. The industry is different, but how we go about it is very much the same. So I knew that, okay, this is a new industry. I have to learn the basics like I would do in dancing, right? So I would learn the fundamentals, the basics. I would just become a student first. So I would learn everything I possibly could within that new industry. So I went to different schools, took different courses, continued to educate myself. Talent is not all, right? Your eye is not all. You always need that formal education in a way that you need some tangible information. So I would do that first. I was like, okay, in dancing, I needed to learn the basic steps. Here, I have to learn the basic steps as well. So I would start off from that. And then I would, knew that relationships are important. So I would get myself into the organizations, into the networking circles. I would immerse myself in that industry to get to know people, just like I did when I was in the ballroom dance industry. And basically followed all of the steps that took me to become the world champion. I started following the same steps and establishing those little milestones in the new industry, because that's the only way I knew how to do it. So I think when we take this thought that it's something new and we don't know how to do it out of our mindset and we approach this from the way of, okay, this is different, but let's use the tools that we've learned so far and see if they work, it might not be such a difficult thing to achieve.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's such an important perspective. And, speaking of perspective, when I've switched to different careers, a lot of times it's been vastly different career paths and jobs. Something that kind of helped me get through was that confidence that, all right, I might be coming from something completely different. Like what comes to mind for me was when I was I had only been modeling really after college, and then I went into a finance setting. I had never had a desk job where I had to wear a suit. There was such a mental block there, thinking, okay, are other people going to know that this is my first desk job? But then what really brought me comfort and confidence was knowing that I might have a different perspective from these people that have maybe been on this track the whole way or have had other tracks. But that perspective could be that much more important and valuable, that I might be able to see things a little bit differently and bring new solutions to the table that they haven't been able to find before. So knowing that your new perspective is actually a breath of fresh air in the new industry that you're approaching, and that kind of pivot, even though it still is daunting, and it takes a certain level of being humble enough to re-educate, learn the basics. I think that in today's world, it's so tempting to want to just rush through that and be an expert instantly. And it's just in certain things, maybe we can do that faster than we used to, that information is more accessible. But in terms of mastering something, it takes time and it takes learning the basics and then relearning the basics when they change in your industry, because they change quicker than they ever used to as well.
100%. And also, what I'd like to mention here is that even when you become a master, you never stop learning. When I was a champion in dancing, I never stopped taking lessons because you can always do better than you do. The level of my mastery from 20 years ago when I was getting those accolades, it's not what the level of mastery of today. The champions of today are probably far better than what I was 20 years ago because everything evolves. And therefore, no matter how good you are, you always have to keep on learning because you can only be better. So I think adopting that mindset makes it easier to pursue all of those different avenues because you you have to be proud of how far you've come and what you know, but you have to always be humble in a way that you need to learn more. Like you mentioned, the fresh perspective, absolutely, that's an asset as well. It's something that it's not done yet. So this is great. This is my niche. This is my angle. And then continue to learn because you always can be better.
Totally. What I'm hearing in the way you talk about a lot of things is that you're a person that actually really enjoys that changing of the tides, that having to adapt, having a new dance piece, a new competition, or, in the world of styling, like having to kind of see what fashion brings us. Like, what are the trends based on, what's going on in the world? What are people needing to feel and be inspired by? And then what stays constant through all of that, your routine or your practice or your personality and your stability. Do you feel like that in terms of your personality? Is that a trait for you, just liking that ever changing tide of whatever's in front of you?
I guess yes, in many respects, because when I look back at my entire journey and my life, yes, I've never really stayed constant for too long, if that makes sense. But I don't want this to also be misconstrued because I am very loyal and I am very focused and I will grab on something for long. But I always like to take pivots and improve on it. Absolutely. And I do wonder if that came from the ballroom perspective when I always had to improve and learn and take different pivots. And how do you become a champion? Not by repeating what someone before you has done, right? You have to
Really?
find that new and better way. So I
Yeah.
think that's where it came from.
Well, and also in order to be someone like you were in ballroom dancing, where, your reputation preceded you, people knew who you were in that space. In order to have that kind of name and recognition, you have to have personal style, and in dance, that looks a certain way, right? Your signature style, even though you're doing different things, like a really successful dancer, you recognize them, immediately because they have a certain way, a certain little things that they do, or, we see it in our Olympians as we, watch them getting ready, like the gymnasts, it's like, oh yeah, she always does this. There's a different way our bodies move or just our energy precedes us. You have to be able to embrace that kind of personal style, even when you're meeting the different, you know, dance moves and things that are going to give you points.
I think that's a great way of looking at this. So everybody learns the same things, right? We all been given the same basic syllabus, right? The steps. But how do you differentiate the way you do them from someone else on the floor? And that's where you start developing your signature style, something that you're going to be recognized by, memorable, etc. And I think that is something that definitely helped me think of personal style as more than just on the dance floor, but anywhere else, right? How people are going to remember you. And, it's not to think of style as, okay, you have to have this crazy persona, something that, it's unlike everybody else. It's not that. It's those little things, little nuances that are going to be very recognizable to you. Let's say Asha always wore this beautiful hairstyle and, has this classic look, right? There are, a lot of women might have this beautiful hairstyle and the classic look, but you will do it in a way that is very unique to you. And I think that's what personal style means and how it can really help someone to achieve certain things in life for sure.
I feel like someone told me when I was starting modeling and trying to figure out like my walk when I was doing runway, someone told me that, you're going to have a certain signature, whether you like it or not. Like people, you're going to be known for something in this kind of space, especially when you're using your body and your personal brand as your business. And that you can either have a hand in crafting that, take it by your own reins and figure out what that's going to be for you, or, you can let other people determine it for you. And that was impactful for me because I realized like, okay, like, well, I don't want other people defining me or having, my own personality be by accident. And that really made a difference for me. So I was like, okay, well then what do I need to tap into every time I am about to hit the runway? And then I just started booking things like crazy when I kind of compare it to the like, what is Beyonce's like Sasha Fierce? I had like a series of statements that I would kind of just like reiterate in my mind. I think I can't even remember. It wasn't always the same, but it was like, walking as if you own the whole room or like, a
100%.
secret that nobody else knows. And I would just kind of like put myself in that place and take the runway. And I feel like, that feeling of like, I'm in the driver's seat and I'm going to set the tone for how people remember me was very empowering. And somehow people pick up on that stance,
100%.
really standing in your own shoes.
100% in style is the same. Everybody has a style. It can be working for you or it can work against you, right? So, because people will see you and they will make assumptions of you depending on your style. Now, obviously, once they start to get to know you and learn about you, that perception might change a little bit. But also, let's remember that because we creatures of nature, it's our instinct to naturally, I don't want to use the word judge, but make quick assumptions of someone based on their log, only because we need to understand whether how should we proceed with that person. Are they going to be friendly? Are they going to be dangerous? Blah blah blah. This is just our nature speaking, right? So whatever thoughts we're going to form upon seeing someone, everything that they will say, we will be filtering through that thought. It can be the good thought or it can be the bad thought, right? So we're going to be now, whatever they will say, is that matching with how we saw them, how we judge them? Now, the perception can change over time, but it's going to be a lengthy process. So it's really important that if we care to make a great impression, we should really take that style and use it to our advantage rather than to our disadvantage. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, just those little small nuances to like, okay, is this how I want to be perceived? And obviously, everybody's lifestyle will have a lot of influence or how we want to be perceived, right? Because if you are a professional, that's going to be a little bit different for you. If you're just a mom and a housewife, and which is not a bad thing, that's amazing. But you might have different goals about that, right? You might be like, okay, I just want to be casual, not a problem. I don't need to, I don't need anyone to work with me. So it's not that important for me to come across as super professional person, right? I'm coming from a different place. But we have to understand what is our lifestyle, how we want to be perceived, and that's our style align with that message.
I love hearing you talk about this because it really shows that, people might write off fashion or stylist, like career path is sort of like, oh, she picks out clothes for people, but it's really there's deep psychology behind this and the impact of first impressions, and what people perceive of us, but also, how you feel when you put on something. I feel like right now in my life, I'm in a stage where it's like I am in and out of a lot of different contexts. And I almost have like uniforms for those different contexts. And the second, like if I'm going to do something for real estate or an event, I'm putting on clothes that instantly like transform me into like, oh, this is this side of me. But when I'm running to pick my child up at preschool, I want to be able to carry my kids. So I'm not going to wear heels. Like I'm going to put on my mom uniform. And, clothes style is powerful in that it impacts how other people see you, but also how you act too.
100%. Clothes is just so much more, right? It's absolutely how others perceive us, but most of all, how we feel and the energy we want to step into. All of us as women, we have different roles, right? And that's what it is. We're moms, we're wives, we're professionals, we're friends, and then it's just us, how we want to feel when nobody's watching and we have no responsibilities and obligations. And tapping into how we want to feel in this any given moment is the most important, because that's where we're going to really be our very best. That's where we're going to be the most comfortable with ourselves. And that's where our personality will shine through in the best way possible. So if someone, is professional, they don't have to be professional all the time, right? If they're at home with their husband, well, what energy do they want to step into? I call women like box of chocolates, right? You have a different flavor depending on the chocolate you pick up, but they're all beautiful chocolates. So, you know, for me personally, when I want to be in a working mode, I know that doing that in sweats not going to get me motivated. Now, some people might, for me not, because I associate sweats with lounging in front of the TV, maybe having a glass of wine, relaxing. So I cannot wear the same type of clothing where my brain thinks we're now relaxing into crafting a contract for a client or having a consultation with a client, right? I cannot have the same clothing because my mind will not be as sharp as it will be in professional clothing, where I feel like I'm stepping into a little bit of a different part of me, and that will actually shine through. Same with, if I go on a date with my husband, if I want to get into this feminine energy, this sexy energy, and now I want to be flirtatious, I'm probably not going to achieve that in a, two-piece suit, right? So that's why, at that time, I will dress in something that allows me to step into that feminine energy. So I always come from the, how do I want to feel in certain clothing? And then, okay, what clothing will also present well and align with my personality? Because per se, the feminine and sexy, there's a whole range that can actually, feel in that category. So which one of that will align with who I am, and will that be also perceived in the same way that I am? Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely. I think that there's so much interplay between, how do I want people to see me, and be perceived, and like what are the labels that, might be attached to me, but also that sense of like who you are and what you want to feel. And also, I think that a big part of that comes from knowing your body, knowing how to dress. I feel like, and, I'd love to hear you speak to this, from like a client's perspective. A big part of being able to dress with style is to know like what works for your body, like what shapes and styles work for you, what trends would work for you, what trends are you just like, no, that's not me, and how to kind of filter that by being in touch with your own body and personality.
100%. And, when working with clients, that's where I started. I will go to their closet and will actually approach that from the psychological part. I want to know which styles they feel the most confident in, and I will ask them what makes them feel confident in those certain clothing, and I will let them speak, because I want to hear what really they love about their body and what makes them feel a little bit conscious about it, because putting my clients in something that they're not going to feel good about makes no sense. So I want to start off with understanding what are their beliefs when it comes to clothing? What do they feel good in? And then throughout times, I might also help them maybe shift a little bit with what they feel confident in by little tweaks, by little adjustments, and take them a little bit outside of the comfort zone and show them that they can also be super confident in something that may flatter them a little bit better. Like, to give you an example, a lot of women who feel a little conscious about maybe having those 2, 3 extra pounds will want to hide it. But that actually is not showing their figure in the best light. Oftentimes, it's sometimes better to have something a little bit more form fitting rather than trying to hide in a baggier clothes, right? So there is a little bit of a disconnect between how we feel in it and how we actually being seen in it, if that makes sense. So I try to, show them a little bit of different ways of, let's put something on that maybe you don't feel it's right for you, but I'm going to show you that it is by the good cuts, the good colors, the silhouettes that maybe they have never tried.
I think that's so great because you, in a sense, you're curating these different pieces and shapes and cuts for people to consider. You're also acting as this external mirror in a way. As young women, all the way through, our adult years, we have a relationship with the mirror, and sometimes it's healthy and sometimes it can get a little bit warped or skewed, or what we're seeing in the mirror doesn't always match up with what the world is seeing of us. So the value of having someone be like, actually, like, this dress looks amazing on you. Or like, you have an incredible, like, your legs are amazing. Why are you hiding them with those baggy pants all the time? Having someone tell you, and be a different type of mirror, whether it's a good friend, a parent, a stylist, having someone kind of be that third mirror or second mirror is really such a gift and so important at some of these like crucial times in our lives.
100%. And we all have something that is amazing, and it's the way to showcase that and highlight that and make that a focal point. And maybe, not bring attention to the things that might not, in my mind, be the most flattering for sure.
Totally. On the topic of, body confidence and healthy relationship with the mirror and with your personal style, you've shared with me before that throughout, having been a professional dancer at a very young age and now, working in fashion, these are both industries that are very, can be very rigorous when it comes to the maintenance of a certain look or body type. And you've shared with me that you've had a journey in that regard. Can you tell us a little bit about body image and that arc for you, like when it became top of mind and what happened
Mhm.
from there?
Yes, well, I feel like a lot of women go through that and sometimes don't realize that, they may go through experiences that are a little bit more difficult. For me, it started in when I was actually 18 years old. So, as you mentioned, ballroom dancing, yes, has always been pretty rigorous when it comes to body and shape because, I mean, we in those skimpy costumes, right? I mean, it's almost like being in a bathing suit with feathers and French and Swarovskis.
And
So
you're moving
everything is,
around, so it's like you're
and
not
you're
posing
moving.
for one picture. It's
we're
like
not we're not
you're seeing
posing,
every
we're not
angle.
sucking the
Yeah.
tummy in, we are doing movements. So definitely looking great in those outfits was quite important. And quite frankly, like people say, you actually are looking heavier 10 pounds more on the camera than you in your real life. It's same for the stage. It's for some reason it feels like it's more magnified. So being conscious about your physique, it's definitely a topic. Now, at certain point, it wasn't that difficult to maintain it because I was also training so many hours a day that it was natural to stay within a great physique, and naturally I also don't have that much issues. However, at around when I was 18 years old, I had a little bit of this curveball. It didn't start with mentally first. It started actually, I had an appendix surgery. Not a big deal, but I had to be on diet after that just to prevent any complications. And I had a little bit of complications, so I took that to heart, and I did end up having a problem. I was anorexic. And that where my mind unfortunately switched. And that's where I was like, I need to be super thin. I need to, any pound on me, it's like 10 pounds. I cannot. So I got a little bit obsessed with that. And it was a hard time for me at that time, at the moment. It was really hard time. I was suffering from anorexia for a little over 2 years. And I'm grateful that there were people around me who helped me come out of it. But it's something that never leave you.
Yeah.
So you learn to coexist with it, but it's not something that it's completely leaves you. You're always conscious about it, if that makes sense. I don't count my calories today. I have a very healthy relationship with food. But with that said, I cannot go on a diet because I know that if I did go on some sort of diet, I could probably go back to my old days, right? So it's a little bit like with alcohol. People who had an issue with alcohol, they cannot drink anything because it can lead to a larger problem. For me, it's the same. Like I cannot really go on super strict diet or even count my calories for that matter, because I can get a little bit too obsessed with it and, go back to those times. So that's definitely something that is there. But in other way, it also taught me to have a good relationship with health, because I look at food as a fuel rather than anything else. So I will focus on eating everything that is healthy. And that's how I think about health, right? So I don't eat any fast foods. I don't drink any sodas. I don't eat fries. I don't eat pizza. And it's not because it's not good for you. It's just because it's not part of my lifestyle. Let's put it this way. It's not part of my lifestyle. But, I will have vegetables, I will have protein, and that's something that is just a part of my lifestyle now. And as far as the body image, it's circles around health. So I don't love to see women trying to lose too much weight, or because I feel like that's not going to be healthy for them, right? So like just let's keep just being our natural self and just keep maintaining the healthy lifestyle, and we're going to be good.
Thank you so much, Kasia, for sharing this part of your life because it's hard. You are a grown woman, successful woman, and it's still hard to share, eating disorders and recovery. It's not talked about that much. And I think that, the studies are out there with like how when it is studied and reported on, it's like, whoa, like the majority of young women have had some, whether it's, a diagnosed thing, experience with anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, or more of just like a period of their life where it was like, man, that was intense, and I went in and out of those intrusive thoughts, whatever it is, or body dysmorphia even coming in and going. But it still is just one of those things that I feel like it's not the same at all, but like kind of like talking about our periods, right? Like it's only now becoming like kind of okay for women to like talk about our periods. And it's like, wow, this is so crazy because we all have them, or if we're healthy, we have them until, we naturally phase out of them.
Right.
But it's like, why is there shame around these things? The amount of pressure that's put on us, even if we're not in a dance setting or a fashion setting, is enormous, especially with
100%.
like social media and everything. Now our girls it's just like a storm of body image that they're looking at every single day.
I think because there's always these beauty standards that are being promoted. And, to me, I just try to never fall into them. And obviously now, when I was 18, absolutely. I mean, there was times of Kate Moss, right?
Yeah.
So when I was the 18 years old and when I, lost all that weight, I was very much idolized to like, oh my God, you look like Kate Moss, blah, blah, blah. And, that was present, right? So, but I was younger and that was more important to me at the time. Now I look at things from the health perspective. What's healthy on me? What weight, not even weight, it's what lifestyle is healthy on me. And that I try to live by that more than anything else. So I don't really fall for any, now we have this body standard that we should be looking like, or this body standard, I don't want to be like calling any procedures, right? Because I had one procedure when I was younger. Today I wish I didn't, right? I wish I didn't. I wish I was my natural self, but I was in my early 20s and I was still with this mindset that I need to fall for certain beauty standards. Today I wouldn't, but that's the only procedure I had done. And I don't do fillers. To me, it's like I don't want to fall for any of those beauty standards because that's the cycle that you will never get out of because there's always going to be something new and better that we should be achieving, and it's like a hamster wheel. You will never be perfect.
Totally. And it's like if you're chasing the standard that someone else is setting, it's kind of like what we were talking about. It's like either you can let someone else define for you what you should look like, what your look should be, how you should be aging, or you can just define that yourself and stand in it. And I think some of the most beautiful people, it's not that no one's holding a measuring tape up to them and saying their measurements are a perfect proportion or looking at their skin or their smiles a certain way. It's like they have a glow about them because they are alive, and healthful, and that makes them really beautiful.
Confidence, right? Confidence is like the best beauty, thing you can do to yourself. And how do you become confident? Well, trying to really embrace your own beauty and not, what is being perceived as beauty. Because I don't think if you can ever be confident if you always chase that next better thing, because you will always compare yourself to what you should look like and not what you look like. And I think you can't really achieve that perfection by always chasing it. I don't know. At least that's how I feel about it. But when you really embrace all these things that makes you beautiful and you enhance on those, that's where confidence kick in, and you will feel unique and different and unlike anybody else, and you don't compare yourself to anybody else.
On a final kind of topic around the anorexia and how it kind of started, I thought it was important that you mentioned, it wasn't like a psychological thing where it's like, oh, that it's like just the need to be skinny or something just made you, I'm going to go on a diet, and then the diet got out of hand, that it almost happened on accident in a way, that it's like, okay, you had this surgery and then like the diet was introduced, and then it just kind of spiraled. And, I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I definitely went through a period of time where I was very overly disciplined with myself, my schedule, my body, my workouts, what I was eating or not eating. And, I was just not kind. I was not kind to myself. I was just very like, you have to follow this certain set of parameters and look a certain way because of it. But it started after I was in an accident with my sister. And what I realized later through like going through therapy was, I think that approach to my own routine came from a longing for some control. I think that accident, thankfully my sister was fine, but it was unexpected and I felt like it was completely out of my control. And as young women, I think that when you feel kind of out of control, sometimes disordered eating comes up as like oh wait, like this is something I can control. And you don't even really realize what it's doing to your body or what the outcome, like when I think about that time, it was never really like I don't actually even feel like I was looking at myself, like really looking at myself. It was more just like, what does every day look like? And like, what marks am I hitting or not hitting? And I don't really think I was even seeing myself at all really in the mirror in a way that anything like the way I do now. So I think it's important to mention that sometimes, when we're thinking about disordered eating or body image dysmorphia, that it's not always something that just comes purely from wanting to look a certain way, that sometimes it can come from other psychological stuff going on at the time, or just a mindset where, you're already dancing. You're used to like going to practice certain amounts of every day and keeping school and hitting all your marks, that it was like, okay, I guess I
Another,
should approach food this way too.
absolutely. I think, it would be fun to actually check what the studies are and how, what's the percentage of people who suffer from anorexia or any of those body dysmorphia, how much of them actually came from a different source, right? For me, like you said, it was accident. I just fell into it by having a surgery and then being introduced to this very rigorous diet. And that kind of led to me getting really skinny and looking at myself from a different perspective. But also, like you said, it was another thing of like, wow, I can control that. And, back then, I didn't realize that it would be amazing for a young woman to, maybe try to recognize at that time, like what else can cause. Although I know that's a difficult task because as an 18-year-old, we usually don't. But for me, there's two aspects of it. One was that I was a very disciplined dancer. So that was just another task that I could be very disciplined about. And the second one was, as a youngest of four, you don't have much voice in that
Yeah.
family, right?
Yeah.
You're always this young kid that, be quiet, sit in your corner and do your thing, and you don't have the voice at the table. And I know that could have been a part of it as well, where, my voice wasn't really that important, at the table because my older siblings would take charge. And that was one thing that I could have a voice and I could control. And so I think that combined with the immense discipline that I had really led to me suffering from anorexia. But like you said, it wasn't the body image because I looked great. I didn't have to lose any weight, right? Prior to my surgery. I
Mm.
mean, there was like, I was a dancer. I had a dancer's body. So there was no need for it. But that just happened. And the environment was helping to make that, unfortunately, a problem for me at the time.
Well, and I think as a practice, like once I was able to identify kind of, okay, what are the reasons why this sort of happened for me? It wasn't so much that I was like, oh, if those things didn't happen, I wouldn't be in this place or I wouldn't feel this way about myself. It wasn't even like, oh, I should have fixed these things or it's my parents' fault for being a middle child, and wanting
Yeah.
attention or whatever, whatever you could put it to. I didn't feel like I needed to blame something or wish it had been a different way. But I do think talking to someone and realizing like, okay, like there's nothing wrong with me. Like there are things that contributed to this getting a little bit out of balance and I have the power to bring it back into balance was really like a big step in realizing like how to be kinder to myself while still having a challenging, rigorous, athletic, healthful perspective on life, but being able to know that it's like I can still control my body and how healthy I feel without having to be so um regimented, I guess, or punishing to myself. Were there any things for you when it came to recovery, which also, you mentioned that it's like it's once you've been there, it does kind of stay with you. And there's always sort of that like, okay, like I got to be mindful of that, because I've been there and I don't want to be back there. What are things that were useful for you as you came out of it when it was more serious? And even to this day, just practices that help you stay balanced.
I think, for me today, it's really not counting calories and not getting obsessed with anything. It's like the key, logging in my food and seeing how much I eat. No, like I know that our fitness trainers, they would love us to do it, but
I know.
unfortunately I said, listen, I have a history of that. I know it can get really bad with me. I cannot do it. So I go by what's healthy, really learning about what is healthy. It is the key for me. So, all of the unprocessed whole foods, right? If I surround my life about that, I actually don't have to think about food anymore, if that makes sense. I'll just eat what my body wants and how much it wants, right? It wants it. So it's not like, okay, I have to have breakfast and it has to be this, or I have to have this snack and it has to be this lunch. I actually don't live my life like that anymore. I have a few different options for breakfast that are healthy, and whatever I feel that morning, I will have, right? And how much of it I will have. But everything is just to make sure that it's healthy, right? So it's not processed, it's not boxed, it's not packaged, it's not prepared somewhere else, it's not, fried or like we know what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
everything that's whole foods, that's basically for me is the solution, and I don't have to really think about it and not make this as such a major part of my life. And I'm very actually protective of it, if that makes sense. And in times, I hear these diets or now even the Ozempics and all of those other things, I really block my mind on it because I don't even want to consider it, or I don't even want to be exposed to it. To me, I know that healthy whole foods will always be good for you just as much as that 30-minute walk a day, or just as much, as your products, that cosmetics that you use when they are cleaner, they're good for you. So really surrounding my ecosystem around healthy, organic, whole food, natural.
I think that your lifestyle still, someone might listen and say, like, okay, well, she doesn't have any pizza or fried foods. Like, that still sounds really extreme, right? And that anyone could have, they could bring their own lifestyle to yours, compare it and say, but yours is too extreme, right? But knowing your background as an athlete, really, and having had gone through imbalance when it comes to structured eating and also your current goals and the lifestyle you want and how you want to feel, it's really a matter of like finding, well, what does your balance look like? And for you, you're like,
Right.
I don't need to, recovery for me doesn't look like throwing it all to the wind and just eating whatever junk food comes my way. Like that's kind of swinging in the opposite direction of balance. Like you can't just delete an eating disorder and think that like, okay, now I'm just going to like not be conscious at all of anything that goes in my body, but knowing that it's like, okay, well, I can still have a empowered sense of what works for me and what works for my lifestyle and how I will feel after I eat certain things without it getting out of control or
Mhm.
too restricting or damaging my actual health and my ability to do the things that I want.
So I think what's important is that I don't actually restrict myself from eating enough those foods. I just don't crave them. And
Yeah.
I don't crave them because my body now just craves all of these other things, right? And for someone who per se maybe comes from a little bit of a different starting point, I wouldn't approach this as, flipping your lifestyle upside down, but maybe making a small substitutes one at a time for the longer period of time. Because, I came from Poland where our diet over there was more Midwestern, right? Potatoes, gravy, red meat, a lot of meat. So that's not necessarily what I eat today, but it didn't change overnight. I just started to be educating myself more on the benefits of certain foods. And like I said before, I treat this as a fuel. That means that, why are the chia seeds good for me, right? So I would educate myself and then like, oh, wow, I really want those chia seeds because they are going to be so good for me. So how can I incorporate this into my diet? Okay, great. I can do it this way. Maybe I can replace that with that. So it was more of replacing certain things with how much I was learning about what actually is good for your body and what is not. That makes sense.
This explanation is great. And I'm also thinking about how that applies. The same thinking can apply to personal style, right? Where
Yes.
it's like, okay, based on how I want to feel, what I want to accomplish, what I kind of stand for in my own life, my values, what are the choices that are right for me? And it's not going to be what's right for everybody else, right? Like even if you had all the money in the world, if you were like, I'm going to buy every hot piece that runs down the runway, your closet, you'd never be able to even pick things out of your closet because there'd be so much there. You have to have a sense of curation about your life, and it's going to look different for everybody, and it's okay. There's not like a right way. Like with health, it's like, okay, there are guidelines and studies, right? With like, okay, these certain lifestyles are like lead to longer lives and stuff. So there is science there. But like, with fashion, it is really like trying to find your balance, and how often should you be refreshing pieces in your closet? Like, what are the key pieces that like I watched? So Kasia does these amazing closet talks on her Instagram. We're going to link it in the bio, her website and her Instagram. But she gets on her stories and she does closet talks. And sometimes it's like more longer thing with a more complex outfit that she's thought a lot about. And sometimes it's like, hey, I'm just running to the grocery store, but like this is how I'm going to incorporate my style. And you mentioned like the power of sunglasses in one of your videos recently. And you're like, I love sunglasses because they can really like change the whole look. And you tried on a couple pairs with one outfit and it really did, like the whole style shifted. But it's like kind of knowing like what are your levers to sort of pull when you want to shift your style in a certain direction or accomplish a certain attitude. I feel like it's kind of similar with a lot of these choices around health, wellness, and the other things that you spend your time taking care of.
100%. And with style, like at this point, there's no right or wrong. Everyone has their own style that fits their lifestyle. I think sometimes when we project our own perspective onto other people and we see them through our own lenses, we might not necessarily understand why they were what they were because, they don't tell us, right? But everybody dresses according to how they want to live, what they believe in, and what makes them feel empowered. At least that's how they should live, right? So, like I mentioned with the sunglasses, it was very much also based on mood. One day I may feel like more polished and refined, and the other day I want to feel more eclectic and more playful and more bold, and I will choose a different accessories. And clothing has that power to really help us step into a different side of us, and that will project through our energy. So it's something that I love when seeing people being a little bit more intentional about, because I know that they will really flourish when they will step into those energies. And same like with health, is exactly the same. It's when you are more intentional with what's good for you, that's when you're your healthiest, right? For one person, it might be working out 5 times a week. For another, might be 2. And there is no right or wrong, because the 2 times might be way more beneficial to you than, the 5 times for someone else. So I think the key to me, I think that's the biggest takeaway. It's just being very intentional and in tune with yourself.
Yes. I think that really, I mean, that makes me just think of the word authenticity, that I think that was actually in the intro, we did for you, that you're really part of your mission is helping people get in tune with their authentic selves and helping that shine and helping them grow in that by, taking a look at their style as a different lever that they can pull. We usually close up our interviews with like a fast 5 questions. There's no need to answer them really quickly if you can't or don't want to. But I put together like 5 little questions that you can answer just whatever comes to mind first.
Okay.
Right? You down to go into those questions?
Sounds good. I wish I was prepped for this.
No, it's
Just
more
kidding.
authentic, right? Like just saying what is real,
100%.
what really comes to mind.
100%.
So number 1, when you think